John, maybe we can start with you, though, because I'm curious, after the film in 2009, when Jim and you felt you had another story to tell.
We felt when we were making the first Avatar that if the movie was successful, there were more stories to tell with these characters set on Pandora. To be honest, when the movie was done and we were finished and we had the incredible success that beyond anyone's imagination, we needed time to digest. Jim took 2 years and he built a submarine to explore the Mariana Trench. And it was after that, in 2012, that we really sat down and felt that there was enough stories to justify making more than one sequel. And Jim took a year and wrote 1,500 pages of story notes. And we then brought on 3 teams of writers to create sort of like a writer's room, which is something unusual on film,
rare, yeah.
And broke down those 1,500 pages of notes into the scripts that you see now.
Well, I think we can all acknowledge it's an extraordinary film, and we're so glad that
Thank you.
Everyone came back for it. So this entire team has worked with Jim before, either on the previous Avatar or on another one of his films. So I'm curious, when you knew this movie was really going to happen and the following sequels, what you anticipated to be the most difficult part of your job.
I represent a very large editorial team, including Jim, myself, John Rafua, and our dearly departed David Brenner, and 2 additional editors, Jason Gaudio and Ian Silverstein. And editorial on an Avatar movie is unlike editorial on any other movie. And we are there from the very beginning when performances are captured. We put together performance edits that are approved and meticulously selected performances. And those shots and scenes are prepared for virtual photography, which create the template for each scene. And in this particular film, with the enormous amount of live action integration into virtual character scenes, we had to capture a placeholder for every live action character that would ultimately be replaced with live action photography. So we had many stages of editing throughout this process over the years, and it is a very complicated process.
Russell, I'm curious for you, when you came on, especially with the water part of this story, how did you anticipate that would make your job harder?
Well, I've had a little experience with water before with Jim, and I knew it was going to be difficult, and that part was. I came into it, basically, though, I came onto this show as a newcomer. And basically I thought, well, here we have there's already a template for what Pandora looks like. And when I talked with Jim about how we were going to expand on this, he says, well, we have a lot of new worlds here to look at. And we talked about the very, very nuanced light that you find in the forest of Pandora under the canopy. The light was going to be living, breathing as much as the planet did, that there were going to be very many different colors under that canopy. And then we have a world of the RDA, which is its own language of light. So basically, I started off by lighting some scenes, supervising some scenes of the lighting, and I'm very happy with the way those went. While I was doing that, I was prepping cameras. There was so much new technology. And then I also had to speak the language of virtual too. And there was this wedding of the live action photography and the virtual teams. And we had a few bumps, but eventually it went very well, and we were very supportive of each other.
And I just want to clarify, Russ, when you talk about the lighting and a year of lighting, we brought Russ on a year before we got to our live action filming, because we wanted him to be a part of the lighting style of what we call the virtual world, the Pandoran world. So Russell, is the auteur who came in and gave his sensibility for the lighting, because we needed to match it in the live action. So that's why when he refers to that.
Yeah.
So,
Dylan, tell me about creating the world of the Metcaina, because I think it's so unique but feels authentic to what that culture, if it existed, would look like.
Yeah, creating that world was far and away the biggest challenge on my side of things for production design. And real quick, I just want to explain, we have two production designers, myself and Ben Proctor, and it's divided along the lines of I basically am in charge of all things Pandora, environments, cultural creatures, all that stuff, and Ben is in charge of everything human. It's all the RDA, human sets and vehicles and all that. So on my side, the Metcaina village was far and away the most difficult. Jim had a basic idea of these large mangroves, and there would be a village suspended underneath it. And beyond that, it was up to us to figure it out. Like Jim has a vision, but trying to realize that and bring that into reality was far and away the biggest challenge. And so we did many types of explorations. We did a lot of practical explorations where we would build tensile models, even going so far as to engage What a Workshop into building a large-scale miniature of the Sully Marui, the Sully's home at Metcaina, where we engaged the best weavers in New Zealand, and we wove a home and bent cane and did this for real and figured this stuff out for real. Even after a rigorous design process in Los Angeles with illustrations and 3D models, still then like, okay, that's great, let's test this and let's do this for real and weave it. And while that was not a shooting miniature, it became the practical reference and the standard of photorealism that the visual effects had to be held up to. And that and some other walkway studies informed the entire village. And so in Avatar 1, there wasn't a big architectural focus. They lived in home tree, and there was some props and some hammocks and a few things, but this was getting way more into Na'vi design. And we see how the Metcaina are much more advanced weavers. And it was very important to show cultural differences and to show that there is diversity on this large moon. We think of it a planet, but it's a moon, and that it was important to separate those cultures and to see how they draw inspiration from the sea, and that is part of their life, and that connectivity is a huge, huge theme for us. So the whole walkway system is all tensile structures, literally connecting everything there, just as they are connected to the ocean. Just how in the oceans we, connect it with the fractal coral shapes and all the sinuous shapes and the roots of the spirit tree. So we're really trying to find that diversity, but then also finding the common themes of connectivity, which is, one of the major things we see in Avatar.
And Deborah, what did Jim ask of you on this one that you had to deliver?
Oh my goodness. Jim has such a vivid and immense imagination, which is at once sort of a huge, like, oh my God, what a task that will be. But he also just opens the door to every creative bone in your body. So we're so fortunate to have him as our leader and inspiration, really. So, it was a big project. I was the costume designer for live action and for the virtual world. We did all the performance capture. We did, we had to shoot reference upon reference upon reference. But most importantly, I think Jim's most important thing to me was we were going to make every single one of those virtual costumes. That the way they were made, how they were worn, was to inform the digital and VFX team. So it was daunting, and it was marvelous. It was absolutely the best fun I've ever had.
How did you first approach the score? I mean, it sounds like authenticity was such a key part of a lot of these conversations. Was that the same for you?
Yes, I think Jim asked me to read all of the scripts in December 2017. And on the first paragraph of 2, it says, Neytiri sings the song chord, which is this, and this was a thread that wove itself through the film. And so I had this immediate thing that says to me, music is important to this film, and it has a reason to exist. So my first task was to write the song chord for Neytiri to sing. And I looked at that, and one of the things we were working in a thing called Culture Club, which was the idea that Jim said, you just can't make stuff up. I wanted to write this in Na'vi, not in English. It had to feel grounded in Pandora. So I started looking around the world at various different indigenous customs to do with birth and death and so on. And there's one that resonated with me, and it occurs all over the world, is the idea of a spark starting and then the dawn coming. And you carry the light with you through the day, and then eventually you go to the sunset. And I used that as my sort of home for the lyric. I then had to give this lyric to Jim. I wrote it in English first. I said to him, this is where I want to be. Then I translated it roughly into Na'vi, and then worked with Paul Frommer, the chief linguist and designer of the Na'vi language. Once I had the song chord, I started thinking about other themes that were to go through the film, because the family is the core of the music in this, and you can see that in the way that the song chord then expanded into a theme as they're leaving Home Tree. You actually hear the song chord, but it's a big orchestral theme. But there is the sea and the Mekayina and their connection, and that became a theme that I used for when they're swimming underwater the first time and when the Tulkun arrive. And I had one other massive responsibility in some ways, in that because so much of this happens underwater, there isn't any dialogue, and the sound effects are sort of relatively minimal. So in some ways, sometimes I had to be that extra character. The music had to act as an extra character within the film. And so there were certain scenes where Jim would say to me, we have to do this again. We would redo these things many times. There is 5 hours of finished score. Music has always meant something to a Jim Cameron film. And I think this was one of those times where he challenged me, he pushed me, and I think that was part of what, it had to be woven into the film.
So 13 years since the last film came out, what did time allow you in making this film successful? What was it's the best gift having this much time gave to you?
Time allowed us to present what you saw today. I don't think we could have done this 5 years ago. I don't think we could have done this. And I think that, cinema, that word cinema, we all have to fight to preserve it in today's world. And that was really one of our goals, was to create something when audiences around the world go to see Avatar: The Way of Water, they are reminded of just how special the movie-going experience can be. One of the lines Jim wrote on the first Avatar, and it's in this one again, Inate Kameya, I see you. And each movie is designed about seeing things and seeing people for who they are and appreciating that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Please give him another round of applause.
Thank you very much.